Hey, guys, Graham and Chris back here with you coming out of left field. Battle, we have done it, man. Our 10th show. We're finally pulling it out and moving into double digits. What's going on, brother?
Not a whole lot, man. Just ready to talk about some baseball. Actually, I'm getting ready to watch some baseball here once we're done. A lot of really exciting stuff going on in the baseball world here. What are we, 48 hours away from the trade deadline? So
yeah, August 1st, moves are being made. We talked about it. Aroldis Chapman, the first domino to fall, probably going to be one of the bigger ones. Andrew Miller, still currently wearing pinstripes. We've got Jonathan Lucroy on the market, and Chris Sale. Who knows what's going to happen there? We saw the blow-up in Chicago, and, I don't know, man. I thought for sure that was going to be his exit from Chicago.
Well, anyone else, I would agree that looked like it was going to be his sort of tip of the cap to Chicago, and he was going to be on his way out. But Chris Sale is known for his blow-ups, right? I mean, he was really vocal after the Adam LaRoche thing, and I guess he decided that those throwback jerseys just didn't look good on him.
Yeah, I feel like we saw a really bad slasher movie happen in the White Sox clubhouse.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. Chris Sale was acting like a child that night. Didn't like the jerseys. So, according to Chris Sale, the jerseys are uncomfortable and distracting. He doesn't like the fact that they don't tuck, and decided that he didn't want to wear them. The club, of course, said, "Well, you're going to wear the jerseys prescribed," and he took it upon himself to make sure no one could wear them. So he took a knife, of all things, and sliced up all the jerseys. And I think the Sox did the right thing in suspending him 5 days. His actions obviously hurt the team, and there's a point to be made there about what kind of example he's setting for rookies, how he's presenting himself as a teammate to the more veteran players like Frazier, who think, okay, well, I got a pitcher here who can really throw the ball. He's got my back, and then all of a sudden, on a night that he's supposed to start, he has this meltdown, and all of a sudden now he doesn't give the Sox the best opportunity to win that game. And guys are like, well, maybe he doesn't have my back,
Yeah, I mean, I think that one side of it was, maybe Sale was trying to be vocal for other teammates who, didn't want to wear them either. But I don't quite think that was it. I'm a little surprised. You mentioned Frazier. I'm surprised he's still with the White Sox. And I know we're not going to get too deep into this whole Sale thing because it's been talked about and dead in the water. I'm with you. I think it was overblown. I think both sides screwed up. Sale overreacted massively, really showed his backside. The White Sox could have easily said, okay, no problem, pushed it off, done a different thing of jerseys. And I don't know if there was something specifically being done that night where the jerseys were supposed to be worn because of, a kind of throwback night, or they were honoring a team from that era. If not, then just get a different set of jerseys. It's no big deal. So both teams really kind of screwed that one up. Breaking right before we start, man, and I know we're going to get into a lot of the trade stuff here with the rest of the show. Mark Melancon has been traded by the Pittsburgh Pirates to the Washington Nationals, so he will most likely, I think, be serving in that closer role. According to Ken Rosenthal, Felipe Rivero and another prospect are going from the Nationals to Pittsburgh. I think that kind of – I'm at the point now with something that obviously we're going to talk about a little bit more when we kind of finalize our picks for the rest of the year. But I really think that this is going to kind of be that moment where we see that the Pirates are kind of resigned to the fact that they're not going to be making a big wild card push. Right now, they're fifth in the NL wild card standings. They're 3 games back of the number 2 spot. So I think moving Melanson probably is going to tell you that they've gone ahead and acknowledged that they're just not going to be doing it.
I agree. And there's some talk about Melanson not being a good fit in Washington, but he is a better closer than Papelbon.
And Pap has blown, I think, 2 of his last 3 save opportunities.
Right.
And Dusty Baker pulled him very quickly yesterday. He allowed 2 of his first 3 batters he faced to reach base on a walk and a single, if I remember correctly. And Dusty went out and pulled him, which you mentioned, losing confidence a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about Koji Uehara going to the setup role. And that was only because they grabbed Craig Kimbrell, who was really looked at as the best closer in baseball. When they got Papelbon last year, Drew Storen was, killing it. And now all of a sudden he's been, I believe he was traded to Seattle this week. But Pap really is one who, if he's off, he's going to get smacked. And I think we're seeing that with the way that the game has been going recently, where we have seen so many teams that are widely considered the top teams in the game really, really struggling. I'm not surprised at all to see Dusty getting the quick hook, and I think Melanson's either going to be the one to, I don't know if they're going to try and close by committee, or if that's going to mean that Papelbon might be someone to try and move as the tail end of this deadline approaches.
Yeah, I don't think that there's going to be a committee thing going on. It's pretty obvious that Papelbon or that Melanson is the better closer, and he's probably going to get that role. And let's just look at the numbers real quick. Melanson's been in 45 games this season. He's pitched 41 innings. He has 30 saves, and he's pitching a 1.51 ERA. Where Papelbon is even really getting beat up. His ERA is at 4.41. He's been in 35 games. He has 19 saves. He's pitched 32 innings. Papelbon is probably going to get moved into the setup spot. Is that where he needs to be? No. But it's quite obvious that he is not the answer as the closer in Washington. And Melanson probably is. His career numbers are better. The guy had 51 saves last year. And he's on pace to meet or beat that number again this year. So if going through the rest of the season, if the Nationals can get 20 or 25 saves out of the guy just in the second half, is that a good move? Absolutely.
I agree. And Pap is not what he was when he was in Boston, let's be honest. You look at just his numbers this season, he's allowed 16 earned runs. He's walked 13, struck out 30. Melanson, looking at him, he's allowed 7 earned runs, 2 homers. He's walked 9. He's struck out 30. They've both blown 3 saves. Blown saves are going to happen, but, like you said, Papelbon has played in 10 fewer games. He's in 35 games. He's gone almost 33 innings, and Melanson's gone just shy of 42 innings. So, I think there are some mixed reactions to Melanson coming in. I think it's a good pickup. There was rumor they were going to make a run at Chapman. Obviously, Chapman goes to the Cubs, which is a huge pickup for the Cubs. Something I think is kind of ironic and all that, and you and I talked about this week. We said, I think in week 3, when we were talking about the Nationals-Cubs series, I think you were actually you might have been in Rome that week, that we really thought that the Cubs needed to add a lefty arm into the back end of that bullpen because they didn't have much. And there really had been no rumors made. They were still on their huge charge to the National League. Then all of a sudden, they begin to taper off and take a precipitous turn. And what they go out and do, they went out and added a lefty arm to that bullpen.
Exactly.
So, I think it's a good feel for what's going on. I think they made a really good choice in getting Aroldis Chapman. But we've seen a few pitchers get moved around. One of those this was a couple of weeks ago, granted, but it was Drew Pomeranz. And Pomeranz came from the Padres. Obviously, San Diego has made no bones about it. They are dumping off pieces. B.J. Upton to Toronto. Derek Norris most likely is going to be getting moved. I think they want to get out of Matt Kemp's contract, but they got to eat an immense amount of money to get out of Matt Kemp's contract. Pomeranz, compared to his career numbers, has been having a fantastic year. And you and I both have watched the first couple of games that he's pitched for Boston. The first one was rough. I mean, he was pitching very well. The problem is he got such a big lead in that third inning. He had to sit for so long. I think he kind of fell apart, and the Giants really broke that lead down to almost nothing. But against the Tigers the other day, it was really, really good.
Well, and let's not forget that in that game against the Giants, that first start he had for the Sox, he was really relying on that cutter, which is sort of a new pitch for him. He's working the upper end of that zone. He's working high in the zone with it, which if he can control it, could be good for him, but not as an every pitch. And that's what he was doing. He was throwing that cutter a lot. He was really working high in the zone in that game. And I told you when we were watching that game that one thing that guys in the Giants lineup do well is adjust up. And they did. And that, yes, he sat for a long time. That cutter started to flatten out, but he was still working it high, and it hurt him badly. But, yeah, no, his game against the Tigers was really good. And what he changed was he started throwing his curveball. He threw 99 pitches in that game against against the Tigers. 53 of them were curveballs. He had 7 strikeouts, 6 of them on the curve. So, when he comes out and says, "Hey, I wasn't using my curve as much as I wanted to when I was playing against the Giants," and then he comes out and he's throwing that curve against the Tigers, and it's in the strike zone, all over the strike zone, and he's getting people to swing and miss on it. That is where you see him go 6 innings. But
and you mentioned that, because something that you mentioned to me this week, it was an argument that you made, and I like it, and it really fits what you just said. We talk about how Pomeranz's top pitch has been that cutter. It's one he likes to turn to the most. Well, you mentioned the same thing. You had a discussion about, I think it was Dylan Betances, was that his best pitch isn't a fastball, it's his knuckle curve. If he can work the top of that zone with that cut fastball and then finish hitters off with the movement going down with that curveball, that curveball may not be necessarily his best pitch, but it could be his most important pitch to make him successfully go deep into games with the Red Sox and help them make that push for the wild card or possibly the division, because that division still is wide open between the Jays, the Orioles, and the Sox.
Right. And to give everybody a little bit of background, I was having a conversation with another person who loves the game, who also loves the Yankees, and he was complaining that Betances was relying on that knuckle curve and not throwing his fastball, which is high 90s, 98, 99 sometimes he can hit with that fastball, which is probably in deference to what the guy was telling me was probably what got Betances a shot at the bigs. Like 2 or 3% of pitchers in baseball can throw that fast.
So you can't teach velocity, but you need to learn more than just having a jet attached to your right or left shoulder.
Right, which is what we see with Aroldis Chapman, right? He throws really hard, but he doesn't really have a whole lot of control. So his argument is that because it's fast and because it was probably what got him his shot at Major League Baseball, his fastball is his best pitch. Well, the numbers don't really prove that out. Betances' best pitch is that knuckle curve. He throws it twice as much as he throws the fastball. Hitters are hitting 119 against it, and he's thrown it 400 and something times as opposed to 200 and something fastballs that he's thrown over the course of the season. And hitters are hitting 354 against the fastball and 119 against the curve. So obviously the curve is the better pitch.
It's also a very rare pitch. A knuckle curve is not it's kind of like an old palm ball or a screwball. It's not something that you see very often. The guys that have it and can command it have a huge advantage because it's very hard for a hitter to prepare for something like that.
And let's not forget that knuckle curve is the same thing that Drew Pomeranz is throwing. Drew Pomeranz is throwing a knuckle curve. He in an interview about that curveball that he likes to throw, he was saying that he learned that knuckle curve from his dad. And Drew Pomeranz's control of that curveball is a little bit odd because it doesn't run like a knuckle curve. It runs like a 12-6 curve, right? We've watched that. And I even made a comment when we were watching that game that he needs to rely on that 12-6 curve. Apparently, it is, in fact, a knuckle curve.
So now you're getting that downward bite with kind of the dance a little bit, which, yeah, I mean, that's going to be hard. It's one of those, if you get lucky and you barrel it up, it's moved the wrong direction, but I guess the big thing is, and I like what Pomeranz has done. I think he's a good addition into probably that 3 spot. I mean, David Price is still – he's anchoring as best he can while having some career-high numbers, and I don't mean career-high in a good way.
Right.
And Rick Porcello is all of a sudden seemingly finding himself really getting his groove in that rotation and has been a solid number 2, which is what the Red Sox needed. The biggest thing that they had to do is the Red Sox had to give up an 18-year-old right-hander named Anderson Espinoza. Was one of the number 14 rated prospect in the minor leagues. So Dave Dombrowski, the former GM of the Tigers, now the GM of the Red Sox, said, quote, "I'd rather trade 3 lesser-type guys than Anderson, but that wasn't appealing to San Diego. They really wanted more of the focus of the premium guy. There's always risk with pitchers, no matter how old they are. We know that Drew hasn't thrown this many innings in his career, basically, but we think he can handle it. We also know there's a risk in Anderson, a young pitcher that we like a great deal," end quote. And that was, I think, one of the biggest concerns was that Drew Pomeranz had already crested his season-high number of innings throughout his career before the trade even went through. So then you got to wonder, well, is he going to tire out? Are we going to see issues with the arm? Which I think – I'm not going to say that was the same issue we saw against the Giants where that cutter just flattened out. I think it was a long time sitting, and it was probably getting a little bit cooler up there, so his arm probably started to stiffen up a little bit. But that is the scary thing of that cutter is if it doesn't move, it's a batting practice fastball.
Right, and one of the things that we saw against the Giants was that when Pomeranz got into trouble, he got into trouble big. And when he would make mistakes, then he would melt down after those mistakes and make additional mistakes. And his last inning is, I think, really where he made his biggest improvement. Now, obviously, throwing 5 scoreless innings compared to what he was doing against the Giants, throwing 5 scoreless innings against the Tigers is a huge improvement. But where I really think that we saw Drew Pomeranz turn a corner was in the 6th inning, which was his last inning. Romaine led off the 6th with a single. Kinsler, what's that?
You're saying you saw him stay more composed in an inning where he started to put runs on the board and was able to find a way out of it. So Ramin leads off the inning with a single. Kinsler flies out. Pomeranz makes a huge mistake, and throws one of those high fastballs to Jose Iglesias, who drives it over the monster for a 2-run shot. And Pomeranz immediately follows up with a walk to Miguel Cabrera. And this is where we would have seen him against the Giants, where we saw him sort of melt down and continue to make mistake after mistake. Instead, he turns that corner, comes back, and strikes out Victor Martinez and Nick Castellanos back-to-back on swinging, missing on that curveball. And you mentioned it, and we'll get ready to kind of move on from this. Have you noticed the 2 games that we've watched, who ends up capitalizing the most of his mistakes are righties? Because he on that cutter, when he's missing up, it's getting that nice little drift towards the center of the plate, maybe in the upper right quadrant, big tongue twister there, and they're moonshotting it. I mean, over the monster, it has to be, I mean, a huge arc. So
Right.
I think that's the thing is it's fine to work up because when the cutter moves, he's missing barrels. He's either getting it off the thumbs, off the inner part of the bat. That's fine. But yes, that curveball is going to be the one that I definitely agree he has to rely on in order to change, the perspective of the hitter, because he worked up so much early in that San Francisco game. He never really changed perspective. Everything was majority up. There were only a few that were down, and the majority of the ones down were pitches that he missed. I like seeing him making a conscious decision to throw low. And you could see the Red Sox catcher getting frustrated when he kept going up, and he tends to miss up because he's so comfortable up there. It's almost like that arm slot. It's a comfortable release point. So, I like what I saw out of that, and I think it'll pay off long term this year for the Red Sox if they keep doing what they're doing.
I agree. Speaking of frustrating, though, how frustrated is Yu Darvish? I mean, Yu Darvish comes in, throws 6 pretty good innings on Wednesday, and then the rookie reliever comes in and gives up 4 earned runs in the 8th inning, and they end up losing that game on what started as a pretty decent start from Yu Darvish, who we all know is just coming back from injury.
It's been a rough year for him, but yeah, I mean, he came back really right as the Rangers were, I mean, kind of in full sprint, looking behind them at the rest of the AL West, and all of a sudden everything is tapered off. Shin-Soo Choo has a back issue. Prince Fielder is out. Fielder has not been worth the price of admission. He's batting .212. He's having another neck surgery. I'm really concerned that this might kind of be the tail end of his career with these neck injuries. It's not going to be like Peyton Manning. I mean, this is, everything. The neck is always turned. You're looking at the ball. You're having the constant torque on the body with the bat. I'm not sure Prince will come back, but we've seen Darvish in 3 games in July after he was off roughly a month between June 8th and July 16th with some injury issues. And he loses his first 2 decisions, the 16th and 22nd, to Chicago and Kansas City. Chicago against the Cubs, he had some really, really nice movement. I mean, I was really impressed with some of the things that I saw from him. He went 90 pitches in that, 4 1/3. But on all those starts, he only allowed 2 runs against the Cubs, 2 runs against Oakland, and 3 against Kansas City. So I mean, for the most part, he's keeping his run total down and giving his offense a chance to pick him up. They're just not. And his 2-seamer was really, really nice against the Cubbies. Honestly, the 2 runs that he gave up was a 2-seamer down and into Anthony Rizzo, who I guess had seen a pitch very similar to that earlier in the game, but it was not a missed pitch. I mean, this pitch was going below the knees. He put the barrel down and just managed to pull it just inside the right field foul line, for a double, and it scored 2. But he made a great pitch. It got hit. It happens. It's baseball. But I'm definitely with you. What gets me, and I think, and we'll discuss this because this has kind of been my crazy pick that you still think I'm nuts for. But the Astros are surging. I mean, let's be honest. The Astros have turned a huge corner since right before the All-Star break. With the Astros surging, Darvish, he's going to be a huge shot in the arm for that rotation. Obviously, Derek Collins on the 60-day DL, and he has never really been a low ERA guy. Cole Hamels has obviously proven why they went and got him from the Phillies last year, and I think the Rangers are going to look for another arm to try and strengthen that starting rotation, but also the back end of that bullpen.
Speaking of Cole Hamels, this is just sort of out of nowhere, I understand. But speaking of Cole Hamels, 1 year ago today, as a matter of fact, I made a comment about the Cole Hamels trade because on the same day we saw Colorado trade Tulowitzki away and Cole Hamels get traded. And I made a comment about what the heck is going on in baseball when, when a franchise guy like Troy Tulowitzki gets traded for basically nothing, and Cole Hamels gets dealt to a team that's vying for the same wild card slot as the team that he's coming from. And here again, we see Cole Hamels is obviously going to be one of the factors in whether or not Texas can keep a hold of their keep ahead in this race. That, as much as it pains me to say it, you may be right that this race is against the Astros for that division lead.
Honestly, and we're going to, I said, make our picks. And it's, guys, if you want to take a look at our picks that we made about a month or so ago, you can find them on Twitter at OOLeftField. Always, you can email us with any questions, show ideas, arguments you have, ooleftfield@gmail.com, and find us on Facebook. Just search it Out of Left Field. We're hosted by Graham and Chris. You'll find our picture. Like the page. We've got a bunch of good stuff up there. Some neat things that we found baseball-wise. All the links to the shows. It's probably the easiest place to find links to the shows, including our interview we did a couple of weeks ago with Atlanta Braves announcer Chip Carey. Like I said, you thought that I was crazy for picking the Astros. At the time that we did these picks, we thought that the Central was going to be probably the best race that we were going to see, and all of a sudden the Central is shot to hell. There's only two teams. There's only two teams above 500. That's the Indians and the Tigers. Tigers are still 4.5 back. The AL East is probably the best. You've got four teams over 500 with the Sox, the Blue Jays, and the Orioles all within a game and a half of first.
Right.
So, the Stros are 4 games back of the Rangers. Both teams are 5-5 in their last. What you're starting to see is, I think you're starting to see where the offense is lacking in Texas. As of today, along with the Tigers, their run differential is +6. They've scored 498 runs and allowed 492. The Astros right now, with the push that they've made, they're a +50 run differential. And I understand the argument that, it doesn't always mean anything because you can have a huge game, but that still has to show you that the bats, the bats of the Astros are at least hitting a lot more solidly and on a consistent basis than what the bats of the Rangers are doing.
Yeah. I think that this Astros team, who is definitely not the Astros team who started this season, and I don't know what happened to these guys. Maybe it was all based on the fact that you were bold enough to choose them for postseason play.
Plus Carlos Correa
decided,
came back.
Yeah,
Correa was hurt the majority, so that's been a big piece of them too. And Keuchel finally seemed to find the groove. His ERA has plummeted drastically from the high 8s that he was to begin with. But I'll take some credit. I'm cool. I'll take some credit.
Let's not forget that we also discussed the fact that the National League, all 3 divisions were wide open in the National League, and now all of those races are sort of starting. We're starting to see teams pull away with those. Except the West. Obviously, the Giants are on a huge slide right now. 2 for their last 10. The Dodgers went from being 6 games back to being a game back.
Well, you're a Giants fan. Do you want to expand upon that, Chris Furry? I know how much you love talking about your hometown team. So I feel like you're kind of just brushing over this 2-8 slide in the last 10 games. So please, I don't want that to happen. I want to give our listeners a full feel of what's happening with the game of baseball right now in the National League.
Sure. The Giants are playing badly. And the Giants are plagued right now by injury. I mean, you had Hunter Pence out. You had Joe Panik out. You have Matt Duffy out. When you have two big pieces of your 4-piece infield out, and also two guys who are huge bats for you, that's an issue. Then you have Hunter Pence, who, when he's healthy, is also one of the best hitters on the team. That's
and I believe was reactivated today finally from the DL, which
right. Panic came back
really
yesterday.
Big.
Panic came back yesterday. Pence is supposed to come back today. And we'll see how that goes. I mean, obviously, they're going to take some time getting back into the swing of the major leagues. Pence has been back down doing rehab games in Sacramento.
Yep.
So we'll see how that goes. But
and the Giants have been rumored to be in the mix for Jay Bruce
from
the Reds, which I'm hearing more so isn't about an injury concern Hunter Pence, but it's more so that they're thinking of maybe not re-signing Angel Pagan in the offseason, letting him test the free agent market and go ahead and move on out of the Bay Area.
Well, Angel Pagan is old, right? And I don't want to take anything away from him. Angel Pagan has been a huge part of all 3 of the championship runs that the Giants have made in the last 6 years. But he's getting older. And his bat is not what it used to be. He's not a leadoff guy anymore. He doesn't hit enough to be a leadoff guy. The power has come down a little bit. Now, at the same time, the guy's still hitting home runs sometimes when we really need him. But he's just not the same Angel Pagan he was in 2012. He's not the same Angel Pagan he was in 2014. And even then, he had slowed down a little bit. He's not fast enough to play center field in competition with help me with the name.
Denard Span.
Denard Span, thank you. He's not fast enough to play center field in competition with Denard Span. And Jay Bruce, as the Giants saw in that unfortunate series against the Reds, where the Reds took 2 out of 3 from him, Jay Bruce is a hitter, and he's a good outfielder. And he hit that home run late to win that rubber match against the Giants. And I think that he would be a good addition. All Giants fans are going to have sort of a sentimental attachment to Angel Pagan, but pragmatically we understand that maybe his time in San Francisco is done.
Sentiment turns you into a sub-500 team who needs to rebuild. It's what helped make the Braves a perennial division winner in the 90s is they knew when to move on from guys who had value. So let me ask you this then. Since we're obviously making the transition slowly from Darvish and the Rangers into trades, what do the Rangers need? We know you're going around. You have Jurickson Profar, who we see mixed around the infield. He's really a utility guy. We see him at third, shortstop, second. But Adrian Beltre is always going to be the starting third baseman, at least in the foreseeable future. Hall of Famer, in my opinion. Elvis Andrus, Rougned Odor are going to be your middle infielders. And Joey Gallo, who is one of the really good young players that the Rangers have, are who teams want. Teams want Gallo or Profar. Sometimes both, and the Yankees or the Rangers are there saying, you're out of your mind.
Well,
so I'm not that they don't trade at least one of them, but what they need to add besides pitching, because you and I both know we've beat the pitching issues down until we see another big, massive blow that causes a team a game. We'll come back to that another time.
Right.
But where do they need help? They obviously need, I think, bats in the outfield, and they need a consistent catcher to call a strong game for those big pitchers they have in the starting rotation.
They need a catcher. That is probably their number one concern at this point is the Rangers need a catcher. And so where do they look, right? Reportedly, they've been looking at Derek Norris. I don't think Derek Norris is the right guy. I think that Derek Norris would be probably a second, if not last-ditch choice for a catcher. He does do pretty well behind the dish, but he adds almost nothing to their offense. he's hitting real. I mean, recently he's been hitting over 250, but I mean, at the one point the guy was hitting 192, and his defensive stats have kind of bottomed out.
His current average is 196.
Right. So he's hitting well below Mendoza. And
I think the killer here, and I think the killer here is there's only one real good catcher, offensively and defensively, that's available. Problem is he's both the best offensively and defensively. It's not two separate ones to help your lineup. And you're right, it's Lucroy.
Right.
So everyone that needs a catcher is going to be looking. I had actually heard a rumor of someone in the Nationals, which I think was ludicrous. That was even true because Wilson Ramos is perfect in that spot. The Mets are looking at him, which I think the Mets are in need. Travis d'Arnaud has been injury-plagued, and from what I've read off of Kenny Rosenthal and Buster Olney, is that d'Arnaud would be a piece of the trade if they went to Milwaukee, which before we started the show, there was, according to Ken Rosenthal's sources, a trade was proposed by the Mets. It was for Lucroy, headed by d'Arnaud and a couple of other, I believe, minor league players from the Mets organization. So the other team, I don't think the Rangers have enough young pieces they're willing to part with. They have the pieces, but if you part with them, then you kind of are really hamstringing yourself for a longer period of time. I also would have thought that the Indians would have been a good grab or a good place for him to land, because with Yan Gomes getting hurt and being out for the next 8 or 9 weeks, they need someone to help anchor. That's the thing. I mean, that's your field general. They need someone to help keep them in the lead in the AL Central. And the way the Tigers are playing, it's a possibility Tigers could make a big charge.
Right. I don't know that Lucroy goes to Texas. In fact, I doubt he does. Although, of course, Lucroy being the best catcher available right now, that would be the best fit. The Mets are serious, and I think at this point they're all in with a 3-player trade, offering 3 guys to the Brewers for Lucroy and possibly prospects. But if Texas gets serious and says, "Hey, Joey Gallo is on the table for Lucroy," that might swing things in Texas's way. I mean, Gallo is the number 7 overall prospect in Major League's top 100 prospects list, and he's a young kid who's probably going to have a very productive career wherever it is that he comes up and plays. So that could be very interesting to the Brewers. Although, do the Brewers need help in the infield at third base? I mean, no, right? But long term, everybody can use a great hot corner guy. Everybody can use a great top prospect guy. Even if it's not for anything more than next year's trading block.
Right.
So if Texas gets serious about a catcher, I think Lucroy is who they get serious about, but it's going to cost them one, if not both, of their top prospects, and that might be too serious for Texas.
I agree. I think trading Profar might hurt you a bit more, and Gallo's a great player, but Profar, what we've seen so far, not to be funny, but is batting .301. I think he is the heir apparent to Adrian Beltre. I'm not sure how much longer Beltre has. Still a top player. He's the leader of that clubhouse. But I think you have a hard time getting rid of someone that good, hoping a veteran stays healthy long enough where you can acquire somebody else to replace him. Right. Speaking of young players who might actually be on the move, there is consistent talk that the Los Angeles Dodgers are actively shopping Yasiel Puig.
Right, and they're shopping him for Jay Bruce, as a matter of fact.
Yep.
They are really looking for somebody to anchor as a bat, I think, in LA, and we've seen that Puig is nothing if not inconsistent at the plate this year.
And I think it's a clubhouse issue too. I really just
definitely
there were huge expectations when he first came out. He had that that rookie hard early charge, and then it has been a precipitous and very ungraceful decline.
Right. Well, he's a hard guy to get along with, right? He has that great story, right, of growing up in poverty in Cuba, and then coming over as a refugee. What did he come here on a door or something?
Yeah.
And so he has that great story, but a story like that, when you rely on that as heavily as he did as a rookie, when it was all anybody was talking about was how rough of a life this guy had to live, and then he embodied that in his attitude, right? I mean, he was kind of a hardened sort of streetwise kind of guy. He didn't get along well with guys, and I think that it's just gotten worse and worse now that the Dodgers aren't winning the way that they were, and he's not playing the way he was.
And where does he play? He plays in Hollywood.
Right, exactly.
And he quickly became, way too quickly, in my opinion, he became Hollywood. He has, I don't want to say delusions of grandeur, but you don't talk about being a prima donna. He has way more belief in the skill set that what he can be than what he's actually producing, and that's where I think is knocking him out of Los Angeles. Another trade rumor that we had seen, to kind of go through the trade machine, and I was also surprised. I want to ask you a question before I actually bring this one up.
Okay.
Okay. We look through the standings, all right, and we're in pretty good agreement that the American League East is a 3-team race, right? Orioles,
Sure.
Blue Jays, Red Sox?
Sure.
Now, if we look at the wild card, both the Blue Jays and the Red Sox lead the wild card chase. The Yankees are 4.5 games back. The Yankees dealt Chapman, which, and I'll ask you this question first. Chapman, in an Instagram post, told the Yankees, "See you soon," I believe was what it said. He's obviously a rental. How would you feel as a team getting a guy who kind of reminiscent of what Randy Moss did when he left the Patriots and went to the Vikings, then came back to New England and said, "Hey, I miss playing for you guys"? What would be the feeling in a clubhouse?
He missed playing with Tom Brady.
But what would be the feeling in a clubhouse, or even as a fan, where, hey, we got this great pitcher who obviously has had some legal issues with the 30-game suspension, the gun-firing incident, the domestic violence, who all of a sudden kind of seems that, well, I'm here, but I'd rather go back to New York.
Well, I mean, I don't think I would be incredibly happy at the idea that he's just going to come in and sort of take over the position of closer. I don't think that he's going to be wildly popular in the clubhouse. I don't think he's going to be wildly popular in the bullpen. I think that he's going to come there and throw hard. And when he's done doing that, I think he's going to do everything that he can to get back to New York. And I think everybody in that clubhouse knows it. And the problem with that is that immediately causes unrest, right?
So then if you're a team who's 4.5 games back of a wild card, you've traded one member of an extensively deep bullpen, and that's really all that you've let go. There's obviously plenty of talk and want. Are the Yankees sellers or are they keeping? I mean, what's going on? Are they sellers or buyers? We haven't seen them make any move to acquire more pieces, but they're not making an extensive move to get rid of a lot of guys either. So what are these guys?
Well, coming into the lead up to the trade deadline, it looked like they were very definitely sellers, right? I mean, it looked like they were trying to unload bad money, old money, and get new young guys in there.
Yeah,
but
we'd heard Beltran back to your Giants. We had heard maybe them actually releasing outright Teixeira and Rodriguez. Was Brett Gardner going to be moving, and then all of a sudden, nothing.
There's more people. There's more people in on Beltran than just the Giants too. Let's not forget that there are other interests in Carlos Beltran, most notably the Twins and the Indians. I mean, the Indians probably most of all, although Beltran has a huge salary, and
I'm not sure why the Twins would want him with their probably the second worst team in baseball, but I'm surprised at a team maybe even like the Rangers, who could use a little bit more of an outfield bat if they have the cap room. But the hard part is, I think the Rangers, not cap room, but the Rangers' financial room to make moves without paying the tax is very, very minimal. And it doesn't appear that the Yankees are in much of a mood to eat any salary from these guys who may be getting moved out of their clubhouse.
And that's the problem that the Indians are going to have, right? With Beltran, Beltran's owed $15 million for this year, and the Indians are really, really coming up against that budget cap before they run over into the luxury tax portion of their budget, and Beltran would help them. It would be good for them, but they don't want to pay that money. So, yes, the Giants are probably the team who have the most ability to pay and to pick up that salary without New York having to eat a huge chunk of it. But even the Giants are going to want them to eat probably a third of that contract.
I would think so. I mean, the difficulty right now, I think, with the Yankees is a lot of their players, really aside from that bullpen, are an aging group who are really overpaid, and we discussed this. But it's how bad do you need a piece, and then is that piece going to be viable coming from New York? One of those has been Brian McCann. There's been a discussion of Brian McCann possibly moving, but he's owed $17 million each of the next 2 seasons. We talked about seeing some ideas being tossed around of the Braves picking him back up, but the Braves have made no bones about it that they are purposely retooling. I get you're opening a new stadium and you want to draw a gate, but I don't think paying $34 million the next 2 years for a guy who was probably at his best when he was wearing your uniform is going to help. I mean, if you got Freddie Freeman. If the Yankees eat a bunch of the contract, then great. Then I'd say bring him back. But there are still teams that need to make moves. We haven't seen the Orioles doing much, which that's where I think is big. Is it's going to be a matter of, for me, which of the top 3 teams in the American League East make the moves they need to try and solidify that division. We've already seen the Blue Jays add B.J. Upton, and they got him for a pretty inexpensive price tag.
Right.
And I would say that he's going to add speed, but what gets me is I think you just really, toxified, for lack of a better word, your clubhouse, because now you've got Jose Bautista coming back plus B.J. Upton, and neither one of those are top-notch players, nor are they top-notch people to have in that clubhouse, especially if you're stressing about making a push to try and get a division crown.
Right, and Jose Bautista is a clubhouse cancer, right? And we've seen that. He eats away at any sort of morale in the clubhouse, not only with his sort of me attitude, but he's constantly down about the prospects of his team, right? And he's telling these guys, look, man, we're not going to win the division. We're not going to make the playoffs. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. And B.J. Upton, Well, I mean, B.J. Upton's the same guy, right? He's the same clubhouse presence that Batista is. Now, if Batista was going to be gone, and Upton was going to come in and play in his place, then it's a wash, right? I mean, you're getting the same offensive production, maybe a little bit more speed from B.J. Upton, but basically the same clubhouse presence. As far as a rental goes, if you just need him for speed in the outfield, that's fine. But when you're going to have a guy like Upton and a guy like Batista in the same locker room, now you're going to be getting negativity from two ends. And I don't think that's something that the Jays need. I don't think it's anything that anyone needs, but at this point, the Blue Jays are really going to hurt from that.
And the odd thing to me is, I got to think they're putting him in place for Bautista, because your other outfielders are Michael Saunders, who made the All-Star game. I believe it was his first All-Star game, or at least was on the final ballot for the All-Star game. Plus, you have Kevin Pillar, who is one of the I'd say top 10 center fielders in the game right now. Great range, a good bat, plays all out. So we know Bautista's not going to come back next year. I would be highly surprised if they re-sign him for the price that he wants. I don't quite understand why they brought in B.J. Upton, and now there's talk that the Kansas City Royals, who I think we've both kind of agreed with the way that they have been just sliding down the division. At this point right now, the Chicago White Sox have a better record in the division than the Royals do. They're a half game better, but still, Royals are 10 games out of first place. They're now considering chopping Edinson Volquez. So, I don't know, man. There's a ton of things that are going on around the game right now. I think there's going to be a lot of movement the next couple of days. But, we've seen a lot of status quo staying the same, a lot of small trades here and there. I think Melanson is going to be a big piece for the Nationals. We're already, I think, relatively sure that they're going to be the team to dominate the East.
Well, there have been small trades, but let's look at this. Look at the Marlins. The Marlins made sort of a large trade.
I was just going to go there. Yep, you're right.
They picked up Andrew Cashner, Colin Ray from the Padres, giving up Tayron Guerrero, who's a pitching prospect. They gave up Jared Cosart, who's a righty, another pitching prospect in Luis Castillo. Carter Capps, I think, is the one that surprised us the most.
Yeah, that one blew me away. When I heard that name, the velocity that he has with his length, his height. I know he's having Tommy John surgery, so he's out this year, and maybe they're concerned that's going to go ahead and, kind of refrain him from really getting back up to where he was. I was very surprised that they were willing to go ahead and part with him and not see what he did coming back from surgery.
Well, and, we've seen what he can do with that really, really strange those really strange mechanics he has with that sort of hop forward.
Basically instead of just using instead of basically using the rubber to just with his pivot foot to just push, he's actually basically kind of crow hopping forward for to use a softball term, where he's gaining ground, extensively gaining ground towards home plate, which I'm surprised that Major League Baseball really didn't have an issue with it. I know we looked at the rule and said that they're fine with it, but this is a guy throwing triple digits, 101, 102. Had he not had Tommy John surgery, I would have said that he was going to be a better reliever than Aroldis Chapman, because he commands what he has, and he has more than just heat.
Right, and to give a little background on that, on what we're talking about as far as MLB being okay with his windup and his delivery, When he was in the minor leagues, he came out and he did that hop, and the umpire called him on 2 straight illegal pitches, which are automatic balls, unless there's a runner on base, in which case it's a balk. But he called him on 2 straight illegal pitches. When he came up to the majors, he was still using that same sort of forward hopping motion. And Major League Baseball said that as long as he drags his back toe during that hop forward, as long as his foot doesn't leave the ground completely, meaning he's not getting vertical height as opposed to forward movement, then they're fine with it, which he does do. He does drag the toe. But what really is interesting is that he's hopping forward a good 2 feet, dragging that toe, and then he still has the ball at his hip, and then he's coming over as his front foot hits the ground. Then he's starting to come over, which puts his release point maybe 6 inches back of the infield grass. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what a pitcher's mound looks like, we're talking about a 6, maybe 7 foot swing in release point, which reduces the time that the batter has to react to a pitch by half a second, which can be all the difference in the world. Quarter of a second can be all the difference in the world. And it is interesting that Major League Baseball doesn't have a problem with it, but it's even more interesting that he is so effective with that pitch style and still was put on the trading block by the Marlins. 5 guys the Marlins gave up to get Andrew Cashner and Colin Ray, who are not the kind of players that you give up 5 guys for, especially not a top first base prospect like Josh Naylor or a closer like Carter Capps. Cashner's 4-7 this year. He's running a 4.76 ERA in 16 starts. And Ray, who's only in his sophomore year, is 5-5 with a 4.98, almost a 5 ERA in 19 starts. I mean, these aren't guys that you give up the farm for, right?
I don't think so. I mean, to me, Andrew Cashner, for what they were trying to get out of him, is really just the same thing that the Marlins have already had. I mean, his numbers are nothing to write home about. Real quick, guys, I just went ahead and posted a link to a video on MLB.com that actually will show you Carter Capps' delivery, so you understand what we're talking about, and really why it does put a lot of detriment to the hitters. And real quick, Battle, Kenny Rosenthal just sent out a retweet that Jonathan Lucroy is out of the Brewers lineup tonight, this Saturday.
What?
So not sure if something is happening or if this, I doubt this was a scheduled day of rest. So we'll see if something is coming on that here pretty soon.
It could be that Mets offer, right? The Mets did make a 3-player offer for him. So.
And I think that it's pretty clear that the Brewers are going to retool. Travis d'Arnaud is a fine player to have kind of as just an interim to hold, as a placeholder until you get someone to take over a stronger, job behind the plate. I could definitely see it. But back to Andrew Cashner, let's be honest, the Marlins rotation is still anchored by Jose Fernandez, and he got rocked the other night, but it's going to happen. He's still, for most part, the best pitcher on that team. Andrew Cashner has been, pedestrian to say the least. The last outing that he had prior to his trade was very, very poor. To say, obviously not trying out for other teams, but I was not blown away, and they're looking for someone to try and help them make a run for either most likely the National League wild card, because if the Marlins manage to to blow the lead that they have, that'll be about as crazy as seeing the Cubbies lose the division. But yeah, man, I don't.
Well, the only thing you can say
is I feel like it was a move just for the sake of making a move. I mean, the
Right.
Marlins team ERA for their starters is 4.14. Now, granted, there are some other guys in there, who only start a game here, a game there. I think the biggest reason they went and got him is Wei-Yin Chen is one of the lefty arms. His ERA is just below 5, but he sprained his elbows on the 15-day DL, but who knows how long a sprained elbow will take to heal. But the only two starters that have pitched any significant number of games that have an ERA below 4 is Jose Fernandez at 2.79 and Adam Conley, who's at 3.38. And Conley, young kid, we've seen him well. He's taken a no-hitter deep into a game. They took him out, which kind of to the jeers of fans, but took him out because he's young. They didn't want to, Don Mattingly didn't want to see his arm get hurt. But if you're trying to really add something to put you in prime position to make a move, this wasn't it. This, to me, I guess it was just for the sake of making a move.
Well, I mean, the only thing you can really say is they got Cashner cheap. In addition to giving up prospects for these two guys, the Padres, Cashner's owed $2.5 million this year, but the Padres ate $2.275 million of that $2.5 million, which means that they're only on the hook.
Yeah.
The Marlins are only
paying
on the
him
hook
less
for
than the veteran minimum.
Right. The Marlins are barely on the hook for more than the rookie minimum.
Right.
I mean, so you can say, yeah, they got him cheap. Ray only has a salary of $510,000 anyway. So they got them both cheap money wise, and it could be that maybe the Marlins are looking to dump some contracts, some contractual money, and maybe retool a little bit. I mean,
well, let me ask you this, and
but
I'm like,
is this the first time in the last 3 years that the Marlins have dumped a bunch of great players for basically nothing? No. This is something we've seen the Marlins ownership do not once, not twice, but now 3 times in the last 3 years since they built that new stadium. They have dumped good teams and picked up basically garbage.
Well, now, hold on. Now, let me ask you this, because I'm not quite sure if I agree to the extent that you're going. Do you think that they're trying to pick up garbage? Or, because what I could see it as is if...
No, I think they're trying to get cheap.
Well, but see, I don't see that. I get where you're coming from. But let's say that right now they're already, they're already making a, actually, hang on, we got something breaking here coming through Kenny Rosenthal. Padres are working to trade Matt Kemp. Atlanta is seeking offense. The Braves may be looking to pick him up. Nothing official yet, but Ken Rosenthal just put that out there that Jim Bowden from ESPN has put out there that the Padres and Braves might be working on something with Matt Kemp. That is a team looking to get cheap. The Marlins, I think, normally, they get cheap after they win a World Series. But right now, I think what you may be doing is they're obviously making a push for that second wild card spot. But if Capps is, I'm not sure what he's taking up salary-wise, but they're also lightening up the money that they're paying right now to potentially make a run in the next year or two at a player or to sign someone to, a free agent this offseason to finally bolster that roster to put them over the top. Because if they're holding their own right now without D. Gordon for the last 80 games who just came back from his PED suspension, and they can add a couple more bodies in the offseason, and even if Cashner starts to kind of come full circle and actually find some command, and you have him for that cheap, even if it's only for this year, it may pay off more dividends for them down the road, where this year is not going to be their year in the World Series. Let's be honest. They have no shot at winning a World Championship, but they could be getting themselves in prime position to get to that point.
I'm going to go ahead and disagree with you.
Okay.
The Marlins haven't won a World Series since 2003.
Correct.
So that's 13 years ago. In 2012, the Marlins dumped $163 million in salaries to the Blue Jays. In 2015, they salary dumped Matt Latos and Michael Morse, basically in a move that just blew the minds of Marlins fans who had just agreed to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in tax breaks over the course of a dozen or so years in order to build a new stadium for a team that they thought were going to make a run, especially with guys like Latos and Morse. And then the Marlins salary dumped those guys in 2015 and in almost a fire sale at the end of the trade deadline. And now they're doing it again, I think.
Who is Matt Latos playing for right now? Nobody. He got released.
Right.
He got released by the White Sox. Who is Mark Burley playing for right now? Nobody. He's a free agent. Jose Reyes also left the Marlins to go to the Blue Jays. They traded him for 2-0 to Colorado, and Colorado released him because he wasn't performing at all. So I get that the problem the Marlins had is they went out and tried to make these huge splashes, and then it just absolutely blew up in their face. So, yes, they went ahead and got rid of those contracts. I don't think that right now you already have
when they got rid of those guys, when they got rid of those guys weren't playing badly.
I understand that, and I'm not saying that
to dump their contract like that.
Hold on, I get what you're saying, that in the moment it looked horrible, and I agree. When I looked at it, I didn't get it, but I don't see them doing that here. Prospects got traded here. Carter Capps was the big leaguer that left here. You have you're paying a lot less money for guys who still may end up being effective in your rotation, and you have more freedom to go out and get something in the offseason. You already have Giancarlo Stanton on the hook for $325 million. He's not going to go anywhere anytime soon.
I don't know.
The goal they need is to get Fernandez long-term, and they already have Stanton long-term. You get those two guys, and you work around that. You know, Martin Prado is getting older, but he's still okay. You've got $50 million invested in D. Gordon. I mean, they have a solid team, and they did not give massive pieces away in a dump to go out and get these two guys. They got two guys for less than $1 million.
Right, but they gave up their top prospect in the first base prospect. That's their number one prospect. He is their top prospect. They gave away a top prospect, and then they basically got a wash for Jared Cosart in Colin Ray, right? You got a guy who's at a 5 ERA versus a guy who's at a 5.9 ERA. Both of them are playing horribly. Both of them make $510,000.
Okay.
So that's a wash, right? You give up Carter Capps, who could have anchored your bullpen, right? And first baseman Josh Naylor is their top minor league prospect. Gives away a minor league pitching prospect in Luis Castillo, who is one of their top prospects. Give away another pitching prospect in Tayron Guerrero. I get that they're not giving away salary, but the management and the ownership are doing something that seems to me is something that they've been doing consistently over the last 4 or 5 years, where they're accepting in trade players who don't play the way.
So you're saying that you have an issue because they're trading for players who aren't improving, not playing any better, but you're giving up younger pieces. That's where that's your beef.
Right. And my beef is that this comes a year after they give up guys who, when they were playing for the Marlins, were playing extremely well, guys that the fans definitely didn't think the Marlins were going to give up. And then the Marlins give these guys up and go right into the bottom of of the standings,
right?
And this is not what Marlins fans expected from a guy who has now been voted the worst owner in baseball, because these are the sort of things that he's doing to his fans, right? He's giving up 3 prospects and 1 really good closer, potentially great closer, for 2 guys who are going to come in and be the status quo in a bad rotation.
Okay. Capps wasn't a closer. He was still a mid reliever. He was more of a setup guy.
Okay.
But I understand. Fernando Rodney is a closer right now.
But he could potentially be a closer who
eventually. I think you could see him move into that spot. Yes.
Who does great?
And I get what you're saying. I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to say that
Marlins.
Say again.
I think this is more of the same bad decisions from Marlins ownership. And I think eventually the fans are already fed up with it, but I think the fans are going to really start getting angry when you see top prospects going for guys who just aren't worth it. They could have gotten Cashner for just Capps and the other piece, Cosart, because
maybe, but you're looking for someone that at least but you're looking for someone that can at least be effective now. And I mean, Cashner was still being wanted. I mean, the Marlins weren't the only team that were looking at him, and the Padres are making it clear that they will eat money, but they want young pieces. I still think I understand what your point is.
Who are the Padres getting? Who are the Padres getting that is a piece that fits in their overall scheme now? No one.
Well, you don't think Naylor would be a worthwhile piece to get for them?
But he doesn't fit into this season's plans.
Well, right, but he does, because the plan this season is to get rid of every big contract you have and rebuild.
You said that they need to get somebody who's effective now, right? That's what you just said. The Padres are going to need to get someone who's effective now.
Well, right, but by effective now, I'm meaning they need someone who is ready to get in the minor leagues, make the move up the ladder into their big league team. They are completely retooling that entire team because of how bad they are. So Carter Capps can't even is still recovering from Tommy John. He'll be lucky until he gets back into the game middle of next season, and there's no telling of what's going to happen when he does.
Right. So the only player that the Padres got out of this trade that plays this season for the Padres is Jared Cosart, who is basically a worse version of Colin Ray, who they got rid of.
Okay, but then that works for them, because if they're willing to take that and the Marlins get, hopefully.
What I'm saying is that a Jared Cosart is a straight across trade for a Colin Ray. So if that's the only movable piece that they're getting, the only piece that they're getting that actually plays this season, then that's a straight across trade. So now you're trying to tell me that Andrew Cashner is worth Tayron Guerrero, Luis Castillo, Carter Capps, and Josh Naylor, and $2.275 million.
I haven't seen enough of those players to say yes or no.
Well, we've seen enough of Andrew Cashner this year to say no. At a 4.76 ERA.
Yep, I have no problem saying that I don't understand.
And a sub-500 career win-loss record.
Yep.
We've seen enough of Andrew Cashner to say no. This is a bad move for the Marlins, and it's more of the same for Marlins ownership, in my opinion.
But I understand that point. All I'm trying to say is I still think it gives the Marlins more flexibility to make a move to bolster the major league roster within the next season, because this year is not going to be the year they win the World Series. But they have one hell of a chance to make moves, and now they have cap flexibility or money flexibility to do so. I understand what they need, and they at least needed some additional piece in the rotation. Cashner has not been that good. Maybe at least now that he has some offense behind him, maybe we'll see him be better.
But wait a minute. The Marlins aren't paying anybody any money right now anyway. They have the budget room anyway. It's the ownership that doesn't want to pay people. Every time he gets players that he's paying big money to, whether or not they went somewhere else and did poorly, he had players that were doing well when they played for him, and he dumped their salaries. He's done 2 major salary dumps in the last 4 years.
Yes, but were they winning when those dumps happened? Now, granted,
are they winning now after those dumps? Have they retooled using the money that they gained from those dumps? No.
Chris, I get what you're saying. The first dump after the World Series, that was the junk dump. I get that. I have no problem admitting that. But
wait,
right
after
now,
the World Series?
Yes, when they won.
No. I'm talking about 2012.
I understand
That's a decade after the World Series.
I understand that, Chris, but there have been multiple times that he has gone out and completely dumped the rosters that they've had. I get that. My point right now is they are winning. They're 6 games out of first place in the division. So they're making – so all I'm saying is what I see right now is that they are putting themselves in a position for the coming seasons to have the ability to sign players to compete consistently with the Nationals and with the Mets.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to agree to disagree on that. I have
no problem agreeing that you're wrong. I'm good with that.
Yeah, okay. We're going to have to agree to disagree on that position. I don't want to waste any more time arguing about it. The last thing that I wanted to talk about today really is, as far as trades go, is this – hold on. Let me pull it up again. That a lot of these – there's a lot of things going back and forth that perhaps Boston is now interested in Chris Sale and Jose Quintana. This is updated as of this afternoon. That possibly Boston is looking to the White Sox to further bolster their rotation, not only with an ace, but with a number 2 guy too. One or both of those guys possibly available still at this point. What do you think about one of those 2 guys going instead, or possibly both of those guys instead going to Boston?
There are going to be so many pieces they have to give up. I would say David Price is the first thing to go because we have not seen him be nearly effective as he was in Toronto last year when he tried to help the Jays make a late push. He's not been as effective as he was in Tampa or in Detroit. I know that the Sox are scouting the minor league affiliates of the Red Sox. According to Ken Rosenthal, there's, quote, high doubt any deal will occur due to asking price because they are going to want, obviously, a myriad of prospects. They've already gotten rid of one in Espinosa for the Pomeranz deal. I think that you see Porcello would have to go. Price would have to go. They would probably push for either Bogarts, Betts, or Bradley. And I don't think – I don't know what's going on in the Red Sox farm systems. That's the one side of things. There are so many systems and teams to keep up with. I don't look at that quite as often. But what we've seen from the Red Sox this year is that their rotation is the thing that is most lacking. So if you go out and get those 2 pieces, but you sell the farm of all your bats, then what have you done?
Well,
I get pitching wins. For the most part, you say pitching wins championships, but you can't just unload, the biggest sticks that you've got. And I mean, the whole idea is that when Ortiz retires, you have these guys that are going to kind of be able to step up and keep the Red Sox going. Right. So you can't get rid of that many pieces, plus lose the heartbeat of your team in David Ortiz, and then expect to come back next year and actually contend again in the American League East.
But let me ask you this, and I know that there's not room in baseball for sentimentality, right? We've discussed that before. That there's not room in baseball for sentimental attachment to players, because sentimental attachment to players eventually costs you your ability to win games, win divisions, win championships, right? But let's not pretend like there's not a huge sentimental attachment to David Ortiz in Boston, not only with the fans, but with the ownership. I mean, we're talking about a guy who is probably one of the most beloved Red Sox to come and play in Boston since
you say Ted Williams,
Ted Williams. Thank you. God, I'm just blanking on names today. Ted Williams, since Ted Williams.
Andrew Cashner.
And his final season is eerily reminiscent of Ted Williams' final season. I mean, is it too much? Is it too far to think that Boston might do something a little bit crazy to put themselves in direct contention for a World Series in David Ortiz last season?
But I don't know that if you pick up those two pitchers, that you're going to keep yourself in contention if you get rid of your bats.
Well, okay.
That's the question. The question is, are they looking for just prospects for those two pitchers?
Well, the White Sox are looking for prospects. I mean, they're gonna want. The White Sox are looking for a way to rebuild, right?
So the Red Sox would have to almost deplete their farm system of probably any top 100 prospects they have in order to acquire those two. The asking price has been rumored for sale to be 5 top prospects. Now you're going to throw in Quintana and Sale. I don't know how anybody could go out and get both those players.
Even if they just picked up a Sale, right? Even if they just picked up Chris Sale is the kind of starting pitcher, his locker room antics notwithstanding, he's the kind of starting pitcher who, if they were just giving up prospects, could move Boston into the number 1 overall power ranking slot in the American League. I
have no problem with that. I have no problem with them getting Chris Sale. I don't see Sale and Quintana together. I think Quintana might be a better move than Chris Sale. I think he'll come at a bit of a cheaper price tag, and you already have David Price and Rick Porcello.
And he's arguably a number 2 anywhere he goes, right? I mean, he's a great pitcher.
Right. So I don't think you have to go out and get Chris Sale. There aren't a lot of teams the only team that really isn't, I think, that would have been the fit for him, that needs him, would have been Los Angeles, because you need to make room for Kershaw. So, I mean, the beauty of it is we've got 2 more days, left for the trade deadline. So I know you and I will be keeping a close eye on it, and we'll kind of see what happens. We ran over big time today, obviously getting into, in our discussion with the Marlins. But man, I'm kind of looking forward to getting past the trade deadline. Everything has kind of been status quo in the big league so far. We haven't seen a lot of craziness. So the good thing is that once the deadline ends, that's when the big push happens, and we'll start to see I think a lot of good things will news-wise and just overall play. So then it's been another crazy one. I think we pushed about an hour and a half. So sorry to you guys for going too late. If you're just going crazy having listened this long, again, tweet us at OOLeftField or email us ooleftfield@gmail.com and find us on Facebook at @leftfield. Battle, I'm about to head off to a baseball game myself. Anything you've got before we head out for the weekend?
No, I think I'm all set. I'm about to pop on the Giants game, and maybe they can pick up a win here.
That would be good. Don't want to go 1-9 in your last 10.
Couple of bats coming back today, so we'll see how that goes. But definitely gonna stay abreast of what's going on in the trade deadline, and of course I'm going to be looking for any stories that fit into our sort of purview of bringing the latest news and information and the crazy stuff that comes straight out of left field.
You were wrong about the Marlins. See you next week.